Bom dia a todos. Estamos aqui reunidos para iniciar o segundo dia.
Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here to start the second day on our seminar on medical devices, regulations, advancements, and new perspectives. We are all very happy to see the number of people who are interested in the topic. And because this is also an event to celebrate the 10th anniversary of ABIS. Our anniversary was on November 7th. Now I'll hand the floor to the president of ABIS, Bruno Bondrin, who will officially open our event. Thank you and good morning. Thank you, José. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone who is with us. Once again, I would like to welcome all of you who are here for the second day of our seminar. First, of course, I would like to thank USAID and Anvisa and the Inter-American Coalition for Regulatory Convergence for their institutional support of this event. It's something very important for the sector to have them all here with us. Today, we will focus our discussion on medical devices under the perspective of regulation and covering some specific topics on diagnostics or on the unique identification of devices that will be discussed in the second roundtable. And in the end, we will have a final discussion on the perspectives of regulation and other issues that are related to the industry and to the suppliers of medical devices in Brazil. As José Márcio said, we are also celebrating the 10th anniversary of our alliance. We were founded in 2011 on November 7th, so we just turned 10. For us, this is a reason of celebrating because now we can celebrate the accomplishments that ABIS have brought to the industry and, of course, discuss and plan the coming years and the future work that ABIS has ahead of us. Working together with Anvisa, with ANS, the Ministry of Health, the National Congress, with all government institutions and institutions from the industry. So you can count on us whenever you need any help. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome all of you and wish you a great second day of event. Yesterday, we had a very significant participation from the audience. We had more than 200 people with us, and today this number is even higher. We believe that the topics that will be discussed are very relevant, and the quality of the speakers is also very prominent. So I would like to invite you all to stay with us until midday. And time will fly because this discussion is always really good. Before we start, I will show you a quick video that celebrates our 10th anniversary, and then we'll hand the floor back to José Márcio. Thank you very much and have a great day. 10 years of ABIS, a decade of accomplishments. The Brazilian Alliance for Innovative Health Industry gathers the main entities that represents medical devices in the countries, an industry that follows you throughout your lifetime. You use a medical device from your first breath until the last breath you take. Pretty much everything that is related to the health sector that is not a drug. We have around 70,000 products registered. Our annual market in Brazil is around $11.5 billion every year. And we generate 140,000 direct jobs and 255 indirect jobs. In 2011, the Alliance was founded to join and guide the work of the industry. Together, the three institutions created ABIS that represent more than 200 companies in Brazil. ABIS as an alliance was a great achievement because it brought the topic of diagnostics and medical devices to the agenda. Up until then, we didn't have much room in these discussions. Every discussion around the health industry in the government or in the Congress would always be referred to the pharmaceutical industry before us. ABIS produces documents and studies to improve the public policies in health for the state and society. One of the main documents that we have published is called Health 4.0, that has had an impact in other countries as well. More recently, we have published a new document that talks about the new challenges and opportunities for the sector. Our proposals are heard by the regulatory agencies and by the Congress, and we work to include the medical device sector in the Brazilian strategic agenda as a sector that is responsible for the human, social, and economic development of our people. Medical devices help limit the costs of healthcare, allowing for an early diagnosis and for monitoring. The new technologies bring advancements to Brazil and the world. ABIS has brought more coherence in the recommendations coming from the private sector and transformed them into effective policies. And we have worked to implement international standards for health, innovation, ethics, international trade within this system. We work together to eliminate any type of barrier that might exist to this medical technology that not only improve patients' life but also save them. Well, before I'll hand the floor to Carlos Eduardo Gouveia, who will be our first moderator, I would like to inform you that on the bottom part of your screen, there's an icon called Interpretation. And you can click on this icon and select the language of your choice, Portuguese, English, or Spanish. Good morning and have a great event. Carlos Eduardo, the floor is yours. Good morning and thank you, Jose Marcio. I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of CBDL. We are one of the members of ABIS, and I would like to congratulate ABIS on its 10th anniversary. For us, it is a great honor to have, among so many prominent speakers, to have Marcela Abreu at our first roundtable. She's the manager from the In Vitro Diagnostic General Office. Marcela, for many years, has been with Anvisa, and she has been conducting an excellent work with a brilliant team. Right after that, we're going to listen to from Fabio Arcuri. He's the commercial director from the group of diagnostic specialties. He's a pharmacist, the chair of the administrative board from the CBDL, and a director at ABIS. At this roundtable, we will talk about the advancements in the COVID scenario for the diagnostic world and bring an Anvisa perspective on the topic. And we will talk also about the use of international standards. So, without any further ado, I would like to invite Marcela to share her presentation with you. Good morning, Marcela. Thank you, Carlos, and thank you to all the other speakers. Thank you, Abis, for inviting me to talk about a relevant topic to all of you. I also would like to congratulate the Alliance on its 10th anniversary. I believe that we will have the opportunity to cover different topics that are of interest to all of you and to different segments, especially when we think about in vitro diagnosis. Let me see if I can share my presentation with you. So let's get started. The idea was to cover the advancements in the regulation of IVD's products in the COVID setting and to provide a landscape from Anvisa on the recent highlights on new technology. If you work in the health sector, we are always thinking about the arrival of new diseases, and this is part of the context of everyone who works in the health sector, because we need to be aware of the new possibilities to identify, control, monitor, and manage these new scenarios. And we don't even need to talk about the long term when we think about the context of the health sector, because we know that this is a constant reality. We are not being caught by surprise when this type of event takes place. So since 2003, if we think about period that was close to the foundation of the agency, in 2003 and 2006, we had the avian flu as a factor that got the world attention, which was focused on influenza A and the possibility of the spread of this virus and the need of control that it created. At the time, we already needed to work in this context of having the right resources to identify and to create alternatives for managing this disease. And the arrival of new etiological agents, or with the increasing severity of some conditions, is connected to issues related to human behavior, whether we're talking about changes in the social behavior, something that already happens recently, but also with our changing interaction with the biodiversity of the world. So man and animal interactions that creates the possibility of new etiological agents. So between 2014 and 2015, we had to face new challenges with chikungunya and Zika virus, which have had great significance, especially in the context of tropical countries. Zika virus, it's important to remember that the main focus area was Brazil, and it also required a special attention to pregnant women because of the connection of the microcephaly condition that created a huge impact in society. And this global concern exists because today we work in a world without borders. People travel, and that allows for a faster circulation of etiological agents. So we need to work under that surveillance perspective. If we move forward on the history from the past few years, we have the most recent case that started in the end of 2019, and it's still relevant today, which is the pandemic from the coronavirus that we are facing today. And this is not a pattern that will be concluded right now, but it is a constant scenario in the health industry. Coronavirus has brought very significant challenges because now we are working at a scale, at an intensity that have never been seen before. So we work with needs that became relevant to different segments and to all countries. So needs for supplies, for raw material, for products, a need for the right diagnosis. And together with this great amount of new needs arising from this new etiological agent, we also needed to deal with an environment of uncertainty because very little was known about this virus or how it acted in our population. So balancing risk and access was essential for the decision-making process. Access is seen as an essential element when we talk about new etiological agents because it allows us to take some measurements. So after COVID-19, in the moment COVID-19 arrived, we had very little options to identify virus that would guide our control measurements uh, to control the spreading of the virus and to ensure the health of the population. So the pandemic had multiple impacts into the different segments. So the scale that this virus created mobilized globally different areas that suffered an impact, but it involved health, economy, education, social behavior, and the research and development area as well. So many changes needed to be tracked in a short period of time. In all the activities became focused in getting better results and work in a collaborative way because everyone needed to have access to the resources and information about what was being discovered about the virus. So it is a continuous process, and knowledge is key for the decision-making process. So we have the right foundation according to the development of new information, so we can make the right decisions for the best results. So this surveillance process is constant. It will not be concluded once the pandemic fades away, but it brings new perspectives for us. In terms of regulation, we see the need of working with flexibility. So if you gather all these characteristics to make the right decision for the population, you need to be flexible in order to truly face these new challenges.
This is an image to remind us of those at the forefront. So we have people exposed to risk, but also brings us the view, the idea of the importance. So products for diagnostics are not only important for the moment that you are identifying the virus. They're also important for all the control measures that can be taken when you get some sort of information, the follow-up of a condition, whether it gets more severe or better, and also directed to studies, so that you can know a little bit more about microorganisms, and then you have to have an important work conducted within the in vitro context. We work with biological samples so that we get the answers we're looking for. So regarding regulation, what was important to be done regarding coronavirus? The first thing was to work prioritizing the analysis of records, because we had to align the need and the access. So after the publishing of the genome of the virus at the end of 2019, there were two protocols in place, a protocol of the CDC and the Charité protocol that allow the identification of the virus in-house. So we had to have that resource, and the industry was developing the products that could be distributed in large scale in the future. So we had to prioritize the analysis of records, and we also focused at that moment on prioritizing information that could provide a differential diagnosis. So at the beginning, our focus was on coronavirus and other respiratory viruses. And considering the demand, we also had to focus exclusively on prioritizing the coronavirus processes. Within the prioritization of analysis, we had to deal with agility. That for the public administration was a huge challenge, because you do not train work teams that can perform that type of evaluation in vitro diagnostics with such a speed that was needed. So we were able to recruit within the institution some people that were part of that task force, people that were qualified to perform those tasks, to reinforce the activities so that we had more agility to evaluate the processes. And we also counted on the efforts of the whole in vitro diagnosis team so that we could respond timely. Our goal was to have 15 days maximum for the records. So we started working on the triage of the records and assessment, optimized assessment. We also created bids. So once we had the evaluation, the assessment, we were able to make more products available for the market. We also worked on the change of COVID products registry. At the beginning, we had data that can get more robust And within that scenario, there's the need to adapt those processes, and that was considered something important. One other thing that we have learned with the pandemic was the need of flexibilization of technical regulation, and that concerns different contexts. So we had the registry and good practices in testing and pharmacies, and the enlargement of the expiration date of registered products. At the beginning, we started to accept preliminary data from studies, documents that were not fully complete regarding legal information. Those records were dealt with an expiration date of a year, but also with the provision of update of those records so that they could become products to be launched in the market. The certification of good practices was also optimized. It was not possible to conduct in local on-site inspections, so we worked together, receiving information from recognized bodies, entities, in order to introduce products that had a quality during the manufacturing process. Imports of essential devices were aimed to facilitate and make resources available for the control of the pandemic. When we enlarged the services, testing services in both in pharmacies and clinics, provided a capillarity within that context of identifying the profile of the population, and also alternatives that public policies could done to control the spread of the virus. The enlargement of the expiration date of registry products is important because the inputs were considered essential, and when developing those products, the follow-up of that assessment could allow that product could have a larger expiration date than previously estimated. So in order to have this larger expiration date, using good resources that were good for use, we developed some criteria, because this idea that was not common could be done. So these are some of the issues that impacted the diagnostics sector. One other important thing is the transparency information. We started to work with BI panels that allow the follow-up of demands with daily updates to know the status of requirements, and also the access to consultant of products to find out the type of sample methodology and the instructions, use instructions. With the flexibilization measures, we also have to optimize the vigilance and monitoring measures. So this program was coordinated by public laboratories of Anvisa, together with the registration area, to manage information about those products. And this was also a very important point, because we worked together in the sector with those activities. So we saw that the sector, the industry, was organizing to provide information, to monitor the quality of information entering the market. This is an overview of the BI panel that we have available. This is the hyperlink for those who don't know it yet. So we can divide the panel in 3 parts. At the top, you're able to follow up the timeline of authorization of the products. So you're able to see how many products were being approved at the time for those, for which methodology, the background and evaluation of the records. And this background is divided by month and brings information, important information about the volume that was dealt with within each period. You can also follow up those approved by methodology. There's a search field so that you can access specific information. So you're able to find specific information. This is a public panel available at Anvisa's website. So you have access to information about the product, record number, its expiration date, instructions for use. And then at the bottom, you have how many products were approved, how many were denied, how many records have their expiration date, have expired their expiration date. So we have over 1,000 requests for the approval of products for COVID-19. Here are not the combined products nor information regarding changes that were conducted in those products. So 70% of those requests were approved. Not all of them are valid today, but 70% were approved, and we had 1/4 of them were denied. So we have approved 436 products for antibodies, 107 molecular assays, and 145 products for antigens, and other 6 products for the control of COVID-19. These other 9 products refer to other products that are not included in those categories and may be related to the transfer of titularity. So this gives us an overview that the volume of assays of antibodies for Brazil is twice the size, a little bit more than the assays for the identification of the virus. So this is a very interesting information for the Brazilian context. Here we can see a map, so you can find out the origin of COVID products. So you can see that the most of them come from Asia and Europe. In case of Asia, China more prominently. So we have the prevalence of origin for coronavirus come from Asia and Europe. One other important thing to mention is the need to talk about knowledge. A great challenge was to talk about scientific updates. So we started to exchange information with product developers, and we were talking with companies that were developing new methodologies to detect the coronavirus. So we invited those institutions, so we were able to find out how that work was being conducted. This was really relevant for the technical debates within the agency. We also started to have bi-weekly meetings focusing on innovation and the impact on diagnostic products. The weekly technical meetings that we have to understand the new information and knowledge, and the diversification of sources, scientific sources. So we always have to pay attention to that.
The assessment of different scenarios highlights the importance of communication and integration. So just like other sectors, we needed to adapt to the working from home model, but we also focused on improving the delivery of the results. Our management is focused on generating results and on a higher interaction between different areas for information that is relevant for all of them. So in the coronavirus context, we work with the media, with the judiciary, with the legislative, with international agents, the regulated sector, and with academia. We also did constant tracking of all the international scenario to that also give us a perspective on the quality of the products and on relevant health scenarios. And the changes in the scientific context all over the world. Coronavirus still is a virus that we don't fully understand that, not in a consolidated way. We have different variants and the impacts that they cause. The risk of spreading of the virus that is still is real. We have a vaccination scenario that is unprecedented because now we have vaccines working with different mechanisms. So it's important to keep track of that in the long term. We cannot have all the answers right away. So it's important to track how the population will react and when it comes to the coronavirus scenario. And all these elements encourage the development of new technology. And we see that this technology trend has been common and it is already established, which is the growth in the use of point of care testing products, also an increase in the number of products and softwares with a focus on the health industry, and the growing use of artificial intelligence for health products. All these elements have had a significant growth. When we think about lessons learned after the coronavirus, especially under the regulatory perspective, we realize that moments of crisis are also moments of great opportunities. So we need to work within a context that uh, is comprised by several characteristics and features that include innovations, the need for safety, access, protection, the different changes that take place, the improvement of the technology development and the different health sectors, the importance of working in collaboration and of the development of knowledge, and with a constant surveillance of all those elements. So combining all these elements is central, and that brings us to a central concept, which is the need of adaptation. Darwin taught us that in order to survive, we need to adapt. And in my opinion, this has been the great lesson that we have learned, both coming from the need to be more flexible in certain ways we work, and also the need to adapt to these new scenarios. What changes during the pandemic is the intensity and the speed with which we need to work. So I think this was what I had to say to you. Thank you again for the opportunity. Excellent, Marcela. To quote Darwin again, besides adapting, I think the most important thing that we were able to do together was to evolve. I think the evolution is clear and it has brought us all to a new level. So now I would like to invite Fabio Arcuri. He will do his presentation now. And again, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A functionality from Zoom or send them via chat. And in the end of Fabio's presentation, we will answer them. Good morning, everyone. First, can you hear me? Can you see my presentation? It's working perfect. So first, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. Thank you, Abyss, for inviting me to be here. It is a pleasure to share with all of you a little bit of our perspective. I don't have much more to say. Marcela was able to give you a really good perspective on the topic. But of course, I would like to also to congratulate Abyss on the 10th anniversary. And I also would like to remind you that CBDL is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. So it is really good for us to be here in this event. And to piggyback a little bit on what Marcela has said before I actually start my presentation, but just to go back to something that she mentioned regarding adaptation and communication with different stakeholders. I think that if we go back to the moment Anvisa was founded, when CBDL somehow were present, when things started to happen, when this institution started to be built from the regulatory framework point of view, today, and of course, I can talk about this because myself and many others who are here have participated in this communication process that took place at the time. I think Brazil is in a very mature position when it comes to the communication that we have between different entities and between the regulated sectors and the regulators. The advancements have been evident. And if we look to Latin America, and I have little experience with Latin America, but I can say that we are pretty advanced when it comes to that topic. So I am very proud to have participated in this process together with other colleagues that are here today. Because somehow this has facilitated the communication and the work that we did during the pandemic, which has been a great test for the sector. I believe that, well, if we think that everything could have been done better, but everything that Marcela talked about, everything that she explained was good, efficient, and fast. And Brazil is an example in that sense, both in terms of efficiency when it comes to the regulatory aspects, as well as in how the different sectors were able to communicate. And now to properly start my presentation, I will give you an overview on CBDL, talk a little bit about our view for the near future and for the long term, and discuss some actions that we took during the pandemic in combination with other entities and with Anvisa. It is important to highlight that CBDL, when it comes to this topic and other topics, we don't work by ourselves. It's quite the opposite. We are part of Abyss, as you all know. We also work with regulatory standardization. So we work together with Agile, with the Global Diagnostic Alliances. From the scientific point of view, among others, we count with the collaboration of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. This relationship with Ética Saúde is part of our ethics and compliance pillar, which I will mention later on. So CBDL has basically three pillars: access, regulation, ethics, and compliance. Access and regulation, the first two pillars, just to go back to Marcela's presentation once again, when she talked about knowledge. Knowledge is the foundation of all actions that take place after knowledge is developed. Once it has been developed and once it is understood, it is put into practice, whether through regulation or through access. And knowledge needs to be built, and it is built within academia. That's why medical societies exist, and this is why we have a relationship with them. But it also comes from manufacturers, because to a great extent, many manufacturers have an R&D sector, an R&D department that is really well developed in their headquarters, and they can bring very relevant information to the sector. Information should be assessed, of course, by the academia. This information should also be assessed by the regulatory agency and by the market itself. So things can be available to patients, to the health system, in a safe and effective way. And of course, with a clinical relevance. It is very important for us to make this clear to the market. The market needs to make available to the market products that actually create an interesting outcome for patients. These are our associated companies, our member companies. I'll skip to the next one slide. Here we have manufacturers, distributors, importers, and a huge range of companies. 54 in total. This is the number from December 2020. The number of members went up a lot in the beginning of the pandemic. We estimate that our participation in the market is around 70%. So with that, we also conduct market research that helps us understand the offer and demand portions of the market and how the market is behaving in the different sectors related to the health industry. And if you think about the 2019-2020 period, well, actually, this book called the White Book, it became a reality in 2021, but basically here we have made a number of different discussions to establish proposals to improve each step of the cycle associated to product development that I will mention later on. But this book has made a number of different issues concrete, with the purpose of bringing more sustainability to this sector. And here we work with different alliances. And when I say alliances, the idea is that we wanted to bring more visibility to the sector and to make the necessary corrections as well. During the pandemic, we saw many issues, not from our members, but from other companies in the market. Companies that did all different types of business trying to import COVID-related products. And so we received a number of notifications and questions on CBDL regarding that topic. So part of the work that we did throughout the pandemic was related exactly to that, to correct this trajectory, because in the beginning it was even a little bit scary to see what was going on. And just like the logistic issues that we had, all of us needed to face a lot of difficulties in terms of access because of transportation related problems that of course had to do with everything that we went through. We know how that was and how it still affects us. This presentation will be made available to all of you, and this publication allows us, it can be downloaded through the link. And I invite you all to download it and read it, because it presents a very interesting perspective on the market. And in the conclusion, we have a number of different proposals to improve the market that are connected to its sustainability. Now I'll skip some slides to talk about the life cycle of the IVD products. Basically, we group all the different proposals that we had when it comes to innovative technology, for number one. Number two is regulation. Number three is access. Number four is monitoring and management. So these different proposals, they include tax issues, financial issues. I would talk a little bit about innovation and regulation more specifically, but all the proposals have a common focus, which is supporting the work with other stakeholders to establish health policies, both for the public system as well as the private health system. So what are we looking for here? The goal is to increase access. It is very good to know that you can improve access to the population that needs access to different assays and access to different situations within different infrastructures as well, because infrastructure is an important issue here because it is a barrier for the implementation of new technology. I apologize, or the implementation for the technologies that we do have today. So new technologies are being developed. I will mention some of them later on, but these new technologies are being developed and they allow for people in remote locations of the country. And we know that there are many people that have to face these difficulties in terms of structure. It allows for these people to have some type of diagnosis, not only related to COVID, but some other important diagnoses related to hepatitis, HIV, and others.
Okay, so talking about regulation, the regulatory impact analysis is something that has been going on, and it's part of that journey that I mentioned at the beginning. It's important that the regulated sector talks to the regulator in order to maximize or optimize the time of analysis. At the same time, it's important to try to find a common denominator in data analysis, which data is important, relevant, what data is, for example, required by the regulator, what may be flexibilized, which is also something that Marcela mentioned in her presentation relating to COVID and also related to emergency situations. One other important thing is the cooperation among regulators. The IMDRF has provided a lot of benefits for Brazil, especially concerning products above class 3, because that requires good practices, and that was causing some sort of bottleneck in the system. And this cooperation, as an example, has provided a lot of benefits. This is a two-way cooperation because Anvisa is a very mature agency and contributes a lot to the regulation in the world with other agencies as well. As I mentioned, now we have to work together, and this is already happening, in order for other models of healthcare, which means new products, new ways of conducting diagnosis, have to be understood by the regulator so that we have access. We understand the concerns. Not going to talk about limitations, because when we talk about limitations, we have to understand what they are. And this is a product-related concern. But remote tests, self-testing, are new methodologies that allow the country and the society to have a better understanding of a situation, or in this specific case of an epidemic, or in this specific case again, the pandemic. In order to do that, the quality has to be assured. Quality is not assured by the regulator. However, the regulator approves or not that product, that quality, and this dialogue has to be transparent so that we can assure the society that the test or the product has a suitable, a minimum quality for its purpose. So moving on, I'm going to talk about the number one topic here, which is the patient. Everything else has to be focused on the patient and on their outcome. So physicians, service providers, healthcare agents, suppliers, obviously the industry and other components of this chain are focused on earnings, of course, and their business, but none of that cannot happen if there's not a benefit for the patient. We have to improve the access through the services and the public services in our country. When we talk about the pandemic specifically, CBDL has worked with these three pillars: access, quality, and mass testing. We wanted to work and provide products knowing that there was a regulatory bottleneck, because the time of analysis and there was some natural delay. I wouldn't say delay, maybe it's not the correct word, but there was a delay really to make products available in the market. So here are the new products. I'm not going to talk about that in detail because Marcela has already covered this topic much better than I would ever do. This is basically to mention how things happened throughout time. So we have the development of new products. Anvisa worked on adapting the new regulations to have the market access those products because we were in an emergency situation. So we were talking about an unknown virus and jumping on to the RDCs, the resolutions published by Anvisa. The whole thing was already, the legal and regulatory framework was developed by Anvisa in record time, so congratulations on that. And 70% of the requests were registered. This number is pretty close to the numbers that were presented before. And when we talk about quality, the regulator analyzes, but the quality is provided by the manufacturer. So one way to do that pre and post supplying was to work together with medical associations and the Association of Diagnostic Medicine. We worked together to narrow our relationship in a very interesting way with SBPC and Abramed, which is the Brazilian Association of Laboratories, and so created a structure that at the time was unique in the world to assess those products. So the products were imported to Brazil, were part of this program, which is the testcovid19.org that was created in 2019. And so the idea was to work together with medical and laboratory societies, associations, engage the laboratories, and also the suppliers. no one was really sure of what were the limitations of those COVID test kits, whether they were working with antigens or antibodies or a PCR testing. At that moment, the important thing was to understand the limits and work clinically with those limits. So this protocol was designed. You have 5 minutes, Fabio. Okay, thank you. So the goal was to assess the performance, sensitivity, specificity, predictive value. We conducted also intra and inter tests. And these were some of the participant laboratories. In total, we had 13 labs, over 50 suppliers. And this is being published right now and papers, but most important of all is the creation of knowledge with the laboratories and with the resources that we had available at the time. We also worked on mass testing. So we included drugstores and pharmacies, which allowed for 11 million tests to be conducted. About 2 million were positive, 9 million were negative. So all of that helped us to understand. We know that testing could have been better, but nevertheless, we were able to increase the testing ability. So to close, we have this initiative of the WHO, and now we have about 200 products in the development stage for a molecular and antigenic diagnosis of COVID-19. So all of that is focused on point of care and to improving access, quick and quality access to the population. So here we can see that Europe is the region that is conducting more tests. And when we look at Brazil, here in Americas, the tests quality, the quantity of tests is not so good in Brazil, but things are improving. Vaccination is improving and people are focusing on tests now. And this is what I have already mentioned, to make products available that have quality and that are accurate, with an adequate cost benefit for the market, and to make that available in quantity and with speed. This will help the whole post vaccination vigilance and the deviations that may occur, just like we've been observing in Europe right now, in Germany and Austria and so on. Here is the self-testing, which is a hot topic still, because the patient conducts the test themselves. This is already available, and we have to understand how can we improve the access to this tool to, help fight this pandemic and others that may come. And Carlos, I would like to end with this sentence, with this quote, which is the only thing that is constant in this situation and others is change. So change is the context. We are being teased all the time with these changes, and this is our huge challenge, one of the biggest challenge of bodies like Anvisa. They have to quickly adapt to the needs posed by society and by the context regarding new technologies. So I would like to thank everyone. Thank you for your attention, and I am available for questions. Thank you very much.
Perfect, Fabio. Thank you. Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, Fabio. This is a very interesting topic. I think we could spend days just talking about it. Fabio's presentation was truly wonderful, and you can access it in our website, the Abyss website, because this topic is a very appealing one. We talk about the future when we talk about this topic, and the future is going to bring us a lot of surprises. And these surprises can be good, especially because of the advancements in terms of devices, technology, and the health 4.0 industry with the integration of technology. But of course, we will also have negative surprises as well. The pandemic, as highlighted by Marcela, is a scenario that we are facing right now with COVID, but there will be others. This concept of One Health that combines human, animal health, and the environment, and remembering the need for traveling today, which will only grow. If something happens in Asia today, it arrives in Brazil tomorrow. So my question to you would be the following. Marcela, what do you think would be the legacy from this pandemic, from the regulatory point of view? What do you see as being easier in the futures, even in the use of some concepts and regulatory tools that we have, like the Reliance tool? So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that. So how do you see the role of Anvisa in the new emergencies that we will face? Thank you for your question, Carlos. We always work with challenging situations. I think this is a natural context for all regulatory agencies that constantly need to assess new scenarios, new technology, and balance that to the need of the population with a focus that, because many of these issues, they need to be approached under the right perspective. So from the regulatory agency perspective, we need to control risk and promote the protection of society as a whole. So that is the only situation in which the regulatory control would make sense. I think that our future is already being focused on the expansion of models that were previously adopted, becoming closer to the reliance scenario. Some standards are already going to the public service step, so we can better align this situation, so we can optimize our activities and avoid duplicated efforts on actions that could be assessed by others, by partners, or in a collaborative setting. For me, this is a trend for our agency. I think there are many lessons that can be learned from the pandemic, because the intensity for the need for changes and for reviews grew a lot. And this is part of our perspective for the future now. What about you, Fabio? After all the lessons learned from the pandemic, I think the industry as a whole were able to generate a lot of developments at a speed never seen before. For molecular biology, we were able to see that Brazil quickly adapted to offer point-of-care testing. But the structure of equipment for this biomolecular testing will remain. NGS, that was next generation sequencing that used to be exclusive to the academia, became more frequent to conduct sequencing and identify the new mutations and new strains of the virus. So how do you see this impact in the industry? customized medicine, can it advance because of that, especially if we think about the fact that labs are becoming more structured? Well, I think the answer is yes. We have seen that flexibility became clear. The flexibility for conducting sequencing became clear with COVID, because now very quickly you can sequence the virus, a new strain, different mutations. And this is not something simple in the tests that we eventually did before. So this technology has been available for some time all over the world, but it used to be a methodology that still required some level of adaptation for the common diagnostic market. I would say that COVID was an exception because the amount of tests were huge for the PCR methodology, and it became the gold standard because it's very fast. You don't need to develop, I apologize for those working on this, but you don't need to develop anything else. Everything is ready. All you have to do is conduct the sequencing. And once you do that, obviously you can provide a quick diagnosis for that patient. And when I say quick, it's not for, I'm not talking about the formal reaction time of the PCR, which is a little bit long, but very quickly we were able to establish a diagnosis for the population. So, as you said, we adapt the machinery, the costs, and etc. to that new reality. So the market started looking at this methodology. And when I say the market, I'm talking about service providers in general. They started looking at this methodology as an important methodology, not only for COVID, but for other infectious diseases, because you can get a very quick standard with a very low margin for error. I think this is the great benefit because it is a reliable methodology. And the only problem it might have is a problem that is connected to the regulatory aspect and how difficult it is to register or to have these products available within the regulatory framework that we currently have. But of course, this is being developed and it is available. And I think this is here to stay. It's a new reality, not just for COVID, but for all other infectious diseases. And it's good because the epidemiological landscape of Brazil will change. It will now become much clearer. Thank you, Fabio. And in conclusion, because we have run out of time, but Marcela, the advancements in technology and molecular biology products are being seen even in new presentations like an auto test. Valeria Andrade has a question for you. When will Brazil be able to see auto tests being sold in drugstores like we have for pregnancy tests? What is missing from the Brazilian legislation to make that happen? We have already initiated that discussion, but maybe you could share a little bit about not only this traditional self-testing products, but also the new technologies that are offered in the point of care that are already available in other countries. And after you answer the questions, if you could please make your final remarks because we need to move to the next roundtable. I'll give you an overview combining a little bit of both perspectives. A point of care testing, when we talk about this type of product, we see this as a technology trend that will not go away. It is actually growing. And when we talk about expanding the number of places that could use these type of products, there are some points of concern because we change a traditional environment, an environment that is used to working with some level of control to ensure the quality of the products, and we start placing such products in different situations. So there are some important elements to consider in expanding access that involve the structure that is connected, especially to the environment in which the patient will be tested, the privacy issues, biosafety issues for the management of the samples that could be infected. We also cover those topics. When we talk about some portable equipment, the minimum infrastructure for the installation of these pieces of equipment, issues connected to the management of maintenance cycles, training of the professionals that will be running those assays. So there are several elements that need to be assessed when we think about expanding the reach of the point of care testing products. When we talk about self-testing products, we are looking at a small segment of this type of products. Many of them are connected to the most common methodology for immunochromatography. And we need to remember that even though this test seems simple, it does require some important aspects to ensure the safety in using that type of product. So we have reviewed RDC 36 with this proposal of expanding our reach to this type of self-testing, but we need to focus on who will be the user and how they will treat the type of information that is generated, because we are dealing with an audience that doesn't have the strategic or the basic knowledge when it comes to the health sector, especially when we talk about mandatory notification diseases like coronavirus, which is the topic we're discussing. We need to remember the impact that this information will have, because we have different types of assays, even in the immune chromatography environment. An antigen assay, an antibody assays provide different information. They should be performed in different moments of the disease. So for me, there is a need to have a public policy that is focused specifically for that purpose, especially when we talk about the mandatory notification diseases, which are relevant for the country. So they require some sort of control measurement. So how can we implement policies that could interpret certain information once access is granted to these general audience, and how this information will be managed? So of course, these elements are being discussed inside Anvisa, and we have an open communication channel with the Ministry of Health to assess what is the main purpose for expanding this type of product within the coronavirus context, and if needed, adapt the information here in our agency. We have a lot of work to do, but unfortunately we don't have more time. So I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity for being here, and I'm available. Myself and everyone from our general office here at Anvisa, we are available and we can talk in the future as well. Excellent, Marcela. I think you were able to cover all the main points that talk about the construction of public policies and all the stakeholders that are related to that process together with Anvisa, and of course the civil society and CBDL and other entities that can help build that policy. Excellent. Fabio, Marcela, thank you. Now I'd like to invite José Márcio to continue with our event. It has been a pleasure, and I hope to see all of you in an event we will have on December 6th and 7th. You will get to hear more about it in the future. José Márcio, the floor is yours. Thank you, Marcela. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Carlos Eduardo. It's very good to have you with us. It's a very high-level discussion. Now we're gonna have the next panel that will be moderated by Sergio Madeira. But before that, I need to apologize. We have had a problem in the production, and John from Abbott got an invite at a different time. So we are making the adjustment so he can join us. So Sergio, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank you for the opportunity of being present since the foundation of Abyss. At the moment, it seemed something impossible, but right now it shows that it's a very relevant institution considering the healthcare environment and the healthcare market, to bring new concepts and also to understand that in the pursuit of competitiveness within that market regarding ethical and technological issues, the patient is the most important part. So whenever we look at the market, we have to look at the patient. Within financializing times of the sector, it's important to really think about that issue. So I would like to thank Bruno and José Marcio for the invitation. It's an honor to be here participating at this event. So today we have Hélio Bonfim representing Anvisa. He will talk about UDI, and afterwards we'll have John Terwilliger, who will also talk about the important issue of UDI from the industry perspective. The previous presentations have highlighted the role of Anvisa and the path that Brazil is taking into a globalized position. UDI represents, in practice, this new phase, materialized phase of the engagement that Brazil is conducting within the global economy. So without further ado, let's move on to Hélio Bonfim's presentation. He will present Anvisa's point of view regarding UDI. Hélio, I would like you to, first of all, introduce yourself. We already know each other, but the audience will understand why do we trust Anvisa due to your, mainly your credentials. Hélio, the floor is yours. Thank you, Sergio. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank Abyss for inviting us. Just like Sergio mentioned, this is one of the aspects of what was discussed before, and we will move forward together with other countries like Europe and the United States in this initiative of unique device identifications. My name is Hélio Macedo. I currently work as an assistant of the General Management of Technology for Healthcare Products at Anvisa. I majored in computer science, and one of the initiatives that I have been coordinating at Anvisa right now is the unique device identification issue. Let me just share my screen with you. Okay, perfect. So we will start talking about the unique device identification. We normally refer to this initiative as UDI. And basically, this presentation will be divided in 3 parts. We will talk about the concept. And then afterwards, we were going to discuss the benefits that combine the motivation of creating this initiative, and what are the advancements and perspectives of this implementation, focusing mainly on Brazil, but also talking about the international background of this initiative that has been developed in other countries as well. So just like mentioned in the previous slide, we are going to divide the presentation in 3 parts. We try to balance the 3 parts. Obviously, the focus of the presentation is on the advancements of the UDI in Brazil, so this is going to be the major part of the presentation, but we are also going to talk about the other aspects and the background to get to the advancements in Brazil. So we're going to talk about the concepts, how UDI works in practice, a real life case. We're also going to talk about the benefits of UDI, what our information is stored in the UDI database. And lastly, we are going to talk about the advancements of UDI in Brazil. We're going to talk about the project, the timeline of the actions that are being implemented, and how the implementation schedule is going to work once it's decided depending on the public survey. There's a lot of text on this slide, but I'm going to talk about the main aspects of UDI and what is that really. So UDI is a sequence of numeric or alphanumeric characters that will differentiate products in the market, not only different products, but different units. It's different from products currently on the market that have a barcode, and you're actually able to identify that product, but you're not able to identify, for example, 2 membrane oxygenators from the same manufacturer based on their identification today. We talk about system because we think about it as a system of identification where we have basically 3 elements that together are going to implement UDI both nationally and internationally. The idea is to have the UDI based on global standards. One second important thing is that UDI, as you can see, is placed on the device and on the package. And a third important thing is the information system itself. So moving on to the next slide, you will be able to understand more of the essence of the UDI system. So we have the first item, which is the development of UDI with globally accepted standards. By globally, I mean Brazil and other countries all over the world. We have to place the UDI on the device label and all the superior levels of the packaging. And we also need to have a database to store the UDI information of those products. Here in the middle, you see the UDI not only as a concept, but a materialization of this concept. I used a barcode as an example, which will have a sequence of characters, maybe numeric and alphanumeric characters, and they are divided in two parts. One part that identifies the device, and the other part that identifies the production unit of that device.
Para trazer pouco mais de clareza do que é o
In order to clarify a little bit more what UDI really is, you can see that UDI is a concept. And because it is a concept, it is very flexible to materialize it because it can be materialized in different ways. One way would be a unilateral barcode. One other option would be bidimensional. And a third option would be a radio frequency identification, RFID. All these possible coding options have to be automatically read by a device or a machine. If possible, it's important to have this type of coding that a human being can also be able to read. That will indicate what is the following sequence. So we have between parentheses the coding of what is coming afterwards. So for example, the expiration date, the number of series, or so on. So this is a real case example, a real life example of how to transform all those elements in the real world. So here's a membrane oxygenator. On the packaging, you have the unidimensional coding, a barcode, so that an electronic device can read this barcode and check the information system of a regulatory agency and see what that device is about. So in the next screens, you find all the information that features that device and brings information about the product. So whether it's a single-use device, what is the international coding adopted to identify that device, whether it's a device that it's being commercialized, information about the packaging and how many devices are inside. You can also have the product identifier and information about the manufacturer, and also contact information from the manufacturer. So you can see that a user will be able to read that coding. That coding is unique and may refer to a database of a specific country. And so we will read the information about that product. Generally, we talk about the UDI benefits before talking about the UDI's concept. We understand that this is an initiative that is being conducted globally, and it's important to justify the importance of use within each country. So the greatest challenge is the post-market. Some people have already used technologies that checks barcodes already available in the market, but this has obviously a logistic and economic purpose. it's difficult to identify the same product coming from different production groups. So sometimes you will not be able to identify a defective product from different production groups. And the UDI will provide elements in order to facilitate that identification. There are other aspects that are important about the identification that is provided by the UDI, specifically regarding the same model of products. One important aspect is the safety of users, the optimization of public healthcare services processes. There will be a cost to change the labeling of the products and will increase the line of production. But in the future, the costs will be reduced for suppliers, manufacturers, and healthcare providers. And it's also a possibility of a global vigilance model.
Well, for Brazil, we have seen an example of this using the American database from the FDA. The plan to Brazil is to bring elements that are standardized internationally to our database. So basically, there are 5 different categories that we would like to bring to Brazil in terms of the product. So the identification of the device with the brand name, version, model, among other information, contact information, so information from the manufacturer, information on how to get in contact or get in touch with instructions of use, information on the package, so the date of that package was no longer produced or the product was no longer produced, information associated to the code name and the classification of different products. So Brazil adopts an international classification among different class of risks between 1 and 4, depending on the risk associated to that product, related both to patients and to public health. So information on the different names or the technical names of the products, and finally the characteristics of the medical device itself, such as if it's a single-use device or if it's a sterile product, if you need to sterilize the product prior to use, and other information related to storage, for example. And now we can talk about the advancements that the UDI system has had in Brazil, to bring you some context on the international landscape as well. Here at Anvisa, UDI is a strategic project, and it is included both in our strategic plan from the period from 2020 to 2023, especially related to goal number 3, which talks about promoting safe access to effective and safe medical devices to the whole of the population. And it's also part of our regulatory agenda for the period of 2021 to 2023 in the theme 11.10 that relates to the transparency of the project. So how was the evolution of this history? How have we gotten to this point in which we have UDI as part of our strategic agenda and part of our strategic plan in the context of our regulatory agenda? UDI is an initiative that internationally generated an attempt to create a standardization among different countries. So an IMDRF UDI guidance was published in December 2013. At that point, UDI was on its early stages in some countries like the United States, but for international standardization purposes, this was the first moment or the first piece of document that started guiding countries, not only countries that belong to IMDRF, but to other countries that wished to develop an UDI system. In 2018, a guide was published on the UDI system. We saw the difference between UDI and the UDI system to facilitate the implementation of by different countries. And then we started the history in the Brazilian context. In November 2019, we made the announcement that UDI was a priority for the General Office of Technology in Health Products. And then it became, in 2020, a strategic project by Anvisa. And we started to plan how that would take place within the context of the agency. We created a work group on UDI, including several different areas inside Anvisa, including health services, information technology, the monitoring of medical devices, inspection of medical devices, and a pre-market analysis of medical devices. The work group lasted for 6 months, and with the support from different stakeholders of society, we elaborated an initial standard proposal that today is going through a public survey process, and it's currently being assessed. That period is from September to December 2021. But we did an RDC into April 2021. There was an impact analysis, a regulatory impact analysis that took place in April of 2021. We have already gone through those 60-day periods of the public survey. And the next steps is to send the final proposal of a standard for the directors of Anvisa. We have already discussed some elements behind this proposal, like certain information that will belong in the information system. And the schedule of implementation for UDI in the country will be divided in 2 periods. Initially, we will talk about the use of UDI in the real world, so the inclusion of UDI in the products, both in the labels and in the exterior packaging, without including transportation packages when we think about containers, because the purpose of this package is a logistic purpose exclusively. And on this slide, we see the first timeline we have established. And this timeline starts like this. If we consider the day 0, when we publish the RDC, so when it becomes official that UDI is going to exist in Brazil, we have the following deadlines for the adaptation of manufacturers to this new system. If it is a class of risk 4, there will be 2 years, there will be a 2-year period to adapt to this new reality after the day 0. For risk 3, there will be 3 years. Of course, this is subject to change depending on the results of the public survey. So 3 years after the RDC is published. If it's a class 2 medical device, and if it's class 1, that would be 6 years after the publication of the RDC. And we have the possibility of extending each of these deadlines in 2 years if the medical device is reused and the UDI is placed on the device itself. So for example, for class 3 medical devices, in this case, the period to adapt to this new reality would be 5 years. Now talking about the virtual world related to the UDI system, we would pretty much have the same deadlines after day 0, but now day 0 is no longer the publication of the RDC, but when the system or the information system becomes available. So the system that will store the information related to a medical device that has a specific UDI functioning, then the deadline for the different adaptations refer to that day 0 and not to the other day 0, which is the publication of the RDC. And this day 0 is based on the information system. We have different information systems in Anvisa that will store UDI. One of them is the UDI information system with information on the products, but there will be other systems to monitor the market. For example, in the case of implants, these are orthopedic implants, including cardiologic stents, for example. And to monitor these products, when the UDI is present in the system and when it's functioning, we start to count these deadlines specified here for the type of system we have. So that was my presentation. I would like to thank you for watching what I had to say, and questions. You can ask questions during the presentation through the Q&A functionality, and we will try to answer them in the end of all presentations, so in the final 10 minutes. Now I'll hand the floor back to Sergio Madeira, our moderator. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, Hélio, for your presentation. We can see that Anvisa is dealing with this issue in a very serious manner, and that generates a great level of safety and confidence to the market, because things are being conducted in a responsible way, which will only improve our engagement to the proposal. Of course, we do have questions and comments, but very quickly, let's start with our next presentation. So we're going to hear from Mr. John Terwilliger, and he's here representing the international sector, and he has an experience and the Abbott experience in the matter. And then in the end, we will have some time for discussion. First, we will hear his presentation for around 20 minutes, and in the end, we will have some time for questions. So, Mr. John, the floor is yours.
The speaker is ours. It is yours. Okay.
John?
Can we go? Alguns minutos para essas transições. Aqui vamos nós, vamos lá.
And I think we're ready.
Tá indo, Zé?
Eu que estou fazendo a apresentação.
I'm sharing the presentation. So.
Hi, John. Welcome.
I'm ready to go if you are. Yeah. Hello there, everybody. John Terwilliger from Abbott. Go to the next slide, please. I'm program manager inside the Global Standards and Sterilization Office at Abbott here at corporate. I'm the co-lead for our Global UDI Program Management Office, which coordinates all of our activities related to UDI around the world. I was the program lead for our US FDA UDI implementation for the entire corporation. I've been at Abbott over 13 years, and I'm formerly of GS1 US and Baxter Healthcare. Next slide. We very much like to applaud Visa for embracing UDI to bring these benefits to healthcare as defined by IMDRF, and they've listed 5 major areas. So by globally harmonizing a consistent approach, UDI is expected to increase patient safety and help optimize patient care. I think it's really important that UDI is all about increasing patient safety and optimizing patient care. It really is a very base or foundational type element to get to these things. And we at Abbott, and I know other manufacturers feel the same way, are very supportive of this because of these two reasons. I think it really helps 5 ways. One is the traceability of medical devices.
John?
John, I don't think we can hear you.
Acho que nós perdemos o som, né?
We have lost you, John. We cannot hear you. I think you are on mute.
We can't hear you. Now you're there. We lost you. We lost
Sorry.
you.
I didn't do anything. Sorry. I apologize. Where'd you lose me? You want to back up with the slides?
É sempre uma dificuldade essas transmissões internacionais. Vamos aguardando enquanto estabiliza.
Are we good to go?
Só minuto, eu vou colocar a apresentação novamente.
Just 1 second, I'm going to put the presentation back on.
Here we are. You hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I apologize.
Yes,
I don't know what
thank you.
happened. I'm sorry. Where was I? So as mentioned, very important for patients. If you make it back up, I'll just finish up that one slide. Identification of medical devices, reduction of medical errors, and certainly documenting and then the longitudinal capture of data on medical devices, really critically important for epidemiological studies to be able to see the efficacy of products, et cetera. UDI really helps support that as you truly understand what products are being used. Okay, next slide. We also applaud Anvisa for proposing UDI system based on IMDRF. I think it's tremendously important and to really base it on the international standard. Different implementations of UDI not based on the standard are very difficult to implement by manufacturers and others. And I think it really brings 6 real benefits to doing so. It reduced costs for manufacturers and supply chain stakeholders and system providers, and consequently reduce prices for patients and payers. Custom implementations are expensive. The enhanced traceability of the products distributed through this global supply chain, particularly in case of shortages. If we have a shortage in one country, we're able to very easily identify products that can be used to move in. So that's very helpful. Versus a unique solution to require unique identification for that country, you cannot bring in products from elsewhere. They would not meet the requirements. It promotes transparency and data sharing and collaboration between regulators, between industry and regulators. UDI really does allow kind of that common language about products to be used between regulators from country to country, and also that common language between the regulators and industry is exactly what products are being talked about. Rapid, robust, and cost-effective local implementation. It's easier and cheaper for new countries to implement a known and proven traceability infrastructure. Starting from scratch is hard. Building off what IMDF is defined is certainly a lot simpler and faster. It enables the use of GTINs in medical device registries. As registries for various products such as implantables, breast implants, et cetera, are implemented, it's much easier to compare data when you have that common key of the global trade item number or the UDI-DI. And global manufacturers have already implemented UDI and therefore allowing faster implementation in Brazil. So we say thank you and applaud Anvisa for embracing IMDRF. Next slide. I think one thing that's not commonly kind of thought about, but I think it's also important to note that by embracing UDI, it really does support the effectiveness or competitiveness of Brazilian manufacturers. Local manufacturers will leverage the UDI system understanding as UDI is implemented around the world. It enables the export of products to countries requiring or will require UDI. We strongly believe that we will see UDI every year. More and more countries will be implementing it, and it will be requirements. So again, I think for Brazilian manufacturers to understand and implement UDI really enables them to leverage it for the international marketplace. And healthcare-related products are already marked with UDI barcodes for retail products, EANs. These are very commonly marked on retail products, and those are already UDI. That is a UDI DI, and can already be implemented right away and already is implemented. So I think it is important to note this idea of competitiveness. Again, not commonly talked about, but I think it's important to note. And again, we applaud Anvisa. Next slide. I think we'd like to comment on a few areas for increased global convergence and alignment. These are some areas as we look from country to country where there's an opportunity to maybe have greater alignment and convergence. One is really around the machine-to-machine entry into the UDI database. Generally, there are three upload options. There's a manual entry, there's a spreadsheet upload, and machine-to-machine. And I think many times, or not all times, people recognize the importance of machine-to-machine, particularly for large manufacturers. The number of products and the data requires a highly accurate process. And we believe very strongly, and I'm certain and other large manufacturers would agree with us, that a machine-to-machine is really part of a systematic approach to ensure data integrity and accuracy. To have to manually enter or machine spreadsheet upload is prone to errors and mistakes, and we really believe strongly that it's important to allow a machine-to-machine entry into the UDI database. It allows us to maintain the data in one place and then send it off versus re-entering it, et cetera. It's much more accurate and reliable. And we really believe it's very important to remember that. Next slide. I think another area that sometimes is not always thought of is a process to make corrections to UDI data. No matter how hard manufacturers try, inevitably a mistake will enter the system, so to speak, and mistakes and errors do happen. And we really do support a process that allows for corrections. The US FDA, Food and Drug Administration, has an unlocking process to edit it. This is how they describe it in this document. But I think it is important to really allow manufacturers to go in there and keep the data very, very accurate should they come across a mistake or error that is inadvertently entered the system. So we really support this ability. Next. Next thing is around UDI DI triggers. These are when certain data elements in the database are changed that would require a new UDI DI, and the IMDRF guidance talks about that. And they say that at a minimum, a new UDI DI is required whenever there's a change that could lead to misidentification of the device or ambiguity in the traceability. So this is when we change data that we need to change the UDI DI. I think the real issue here is any divergence in regulatory requirements will mandate a new UDI DI, which could result in a country-specific product, which is costly. You have to either create a new SKU with its own labeling and its own UDI DI, or engage in overlabeling, which is prone for error and expensive, and really does limit product availability. As we said before, when you have country-specific products, it really precludes the use of global product. You have this special inventory just for a certain country. This is a very important area. And on the next slide, these are the UDI triggers that IMDRF has talked about. Should you change the brand name or the device version or model or the ref on the label, clinical size should change, or it's suddenly labeled as single use and it wasn't before. If it's now packaged as sterile and it wasn't before, if there's a need to sterilize before its use, if the quantity of devices in the package change, of course, you would need a UDI DI, or any of the critical warnings or I can never say that word, contraindications, but certainly only when the product is changed. And we really support strongly that regulatory authorities followed the IMDF guidance related to the UDI-DI triggers for the reasons on the previous slide, really to preclude creating country-specific products, which is costly and also could limit supply of that product. So we very much encourage regulators to follow closely on the UDI-DI triggers and not create other triggers that could cause country-specific product. Next slide. Next slide. One thing we also would like to encourage is to not create new identification numbers. The European Union has created the basic UDI-DI and the master UDI. We believe that these concepts are difficult and not certain that they add a lot of value and really could slow down implementation. I think it's certainly caused a lot of extra work and effort on the part of manufacturers for the European Union, and we would very much discourage other regulators from embracing these concepts. Next slide. A little note about nomenclatures. The IMDF guidance calls for the use of the global medical device nomenclature, the GMDN, by regulators globally. Multiple nomenclatures raise significant regional and global challenges for the health industry to implement, train, and maintain error-prone. And jurisdiction-specific nomenclatures are very cost-implemented and even more costly to maintain. And we believe strongly that jurisdiction-specific nomenclatures are negative for patients, health systems, and industry. We very much encourage our regulators and hope that they will embrace just the GMDN and not create a new one or embrace other ones. I think this is really a strong opportunity, particularly between regulators, to also match up data by using a single nomenclature, the global medical device nomenclature. And we are very encouraging of this, that there not be created other ones, and that this is adopted worldwide. Next slide. I have a few additional thoughts around convergence and alignment. One's around direct marking. We very much would believe strongly there should be additional minimal 2 years for implementation. We certainly embrace the USA approach of either or for barcode or the HRI. Some definitely require both. There may be instances where one or the other may be possible, but it would not be possible to do both. And we certainly believe that there should be a exception process to document why it cannot be done. There are certainly some products that are either too small or too fragile that could not support direct marking, and there should be a way to document why it cannot be done. We also believe very strongly that existing inventory should be used up. We should be allowed to be used for all the finished products manufactured and labeled prior to the compliance date may be sold. I think, if we do not do this, we could have supply issues within the country, and also does require a significant effort to try to manage that. Therefore, we believe it's in the best interest of everybody to allow manufacturers to use up all products that they've labeled and manufactured prior to the compliance date that they may be sold. Next slide. Oh, and that's that. I'm done. Thank you, everybody.
Bom, muito bem. Painel.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting subject, and I'm glad that we still have a few minutes to have a Q&A session. We have some general questions that have been asked for both speakers, and there are others specific for Anvisa. Before moving on to our Q&A session, I would just like to mention that ABIS and their members are concerned that Anvisa develops its information systems in a way that it's compatible to interact with information systems of the industry and suppliers in order to be able to upload information in other countries or other places. For example, the FDA. So, for example, Medtronic or Abbott or other industries are able to upload information within the FDA system, and they can share their product information there. So our concern here is that during the structuring of this process, it is important that Anvisa creates a very modern and consistent system information so that we have a flow of information as we would like to, ideally. So depending on the paths that are taken, this may result in a global database where everything would be placed in one big system. I think that's an advanced issue, but nevertheless, we have this concern. And the concern is that, just like John mentioned, is that countries do not come up with different customization so that things flow better. For example, there are nomenclature issues, and the concept is based basically on GMDN. With that, I'm going to move on to our questions. So first question is to Anvisa. Yuri, Tulio, and Paula have asked a few questions about the diagnostic in vitro diagnostic sector. How is this sector going to be involved in this debate? Elio, looking forward to hearing your answer.
Well, when we started planning the regulation of UDIs in Brazil, one of the goals behind creating the working group was the following. Before opening for a public survey, the idea was to have several different stakeholders collaborating in the construction of the standard. And we basically included all different stakeholders that, in our understanding, would be essential to participate and that could add value to this proposed new standard. So we also included in the discussion the IVD sector. We tried to bring all manufacturers of different type of medical devices, and we included other stakeholders from the organized civil societies, such as hospital associations, and the Ministry of Health also participated in the process. The National Agency for the Private Health Sector was also part of the process, and other stakeholders. So when we assessed the results of the public survey, we also noticed that we received a massive contribution from the IVD sector. And we were very happy, and we are very happy to see this, because all these different contributions are really high level. The arguments are robust and solid, and they are allowing us to build a standard that, even though this is a complex process, especially including so many stakeholders, the outcome that is being generated is being extremely positive. All right. I have a question now for both of you. So a question for John and for Elio. And the question is, so the question is for both of you, and this question is about the participation in the process, the participation of the different health services, or meaning hospitals and the users of the products, the ones that will be actually receiving the products, use them, implant them, and products that come with this database. A database that is an international language. And this is the great value behind it, because it's something that can be understood from the manufacturer and throughout the whole chain until it reaches the end user. So even though the idea is to read UDI visually by human means, I think basically the great value behind of it is that you can read it through a piece of equipment or the M2M option that was described by John. And of course, that could generate epidemiological data and information that could be used for the planning, both from the business point of view as well as a plan related to public health policies. But of course, that depends on the fact that hospitals, service providers, and the ones actually using the products can upload that information to a great database. Again, in the Brazilian case, a system that would be hosted in Anvisa. So my question is, how do you see hospitals and health clinics? Are they ready? Or how can they get ready to do this type of upload of information?
Se você quiser
John, if you wish to talk about the international context.
Under the international scenario, I could speak under the Brazilian scenario.
Yes, certainly. I think there's a lot of questions in your question. I think our experience here in the United States is that certainly leading, very forward-thinking health systems have embraced the UDI database of the FDA and have downloaded that data and continue to download it to really update their internal systems to support not only the supply chain aspects of ordering product, but also to support the clinical systems of actually bedside scanning and to capture that data into electronic health records. I mean, that is really what this is all about, is getting to electronic health records, and then all these products are registered, to the patient. So we have a very clear picture of what products were used, and as mentioned by Sergio, to support epidemiological studies. You can basically compare data. I think a lot of the data will ultimately go probably up into various registries to keep track of things. I think data will be, managed inside health systems. So I think this is a very much an opportunity. I think the other aspect of this, of course, is enabling bedside scanning, and some health systems are able to, and some are not, and it does require an investment in scanners. So I think there's a lot to be probably done on the provider side. I know here in the United States, and certain elsewhere in the world, it's the same. There'll be leading systems that are probably ready earlier, and others will come along. But that is what this is really all about. And I think that certainly regulators and governments need to do everything they can to enable health systems to use UDI. Without it, we're probably not getting everything that we should. And one other maybe quick thing, Sergio, certainly the machine-to-machine is really about manufacturers getting data into the database. And I think that's really quite important. I think the other thing you're also talking about is whether or not there may be an opportunity at the national level for the upload of electronic patient records, maybe for better comparison, et cetera. Thank you.
Complementando a resposta
Just
do
to
John.
add to what John had said, besides information that will be available in an electronic medical record and that could be used for epidemiological study to better assess the use of medical devices in the market, we have other benefits that come to the medical providers because with UDI, you can identify within a specific context if that medical device can or cannot be sold in Brazil, and for several reasons, due to a lack of safety or effectiveness, but that data could be checked pre-op and in a very simple fashion. You just scan the product. So it's also possible to use this system to fight against non-official products or false products, because if you don't have that information from that specific product in the Brazilian database or in the American database or in the UDI of a specific region, the product won't be listed there, and most likely it won't be. One of the possibilities or one of the reasons for that, it's because it is a false product. It's a fake product. So health providers can add or can benefit from the UDI in that manner, because UDI can generate a great value for health providers, especially when it comes to patient safety in this context that I described. A patient is about to undergo surgery, and that could be one possible use of the system. John emphasized the importance of countries not doing customizations in the system. And one aspect related to that is with nomenclature. Yuri has a question about that. How can we standardize UDIs with MCM or with the common Mercosul nomenclature? Maybe if you could give him some details on that.
Durante a construção.
Well, when we were creating the standard, both in the work conducted by the working group and right now when we are going through the public survey, we didn't plan for that because we based ourselves in the MRDF regulation, so we did not include this mapping process between the technical name and the common nomenclature of the Mercosul. So this is an issue that could be discussed afterwards. There are stakeholders that could do this mapping initiative, and of course that could be dealt in other contexts, whether or not necessarily connected to the creating of the standard for an UDI. Well, we are almost out of time, so I would like to thank John for his efforts to be here. We had some time zone issues, but in the end it worked out. We're all here together. I also would like to thank all of you for being with us. I would like to thank Elio for his hard work and dedication, and thank Anvisa for working so hard on this topic. And this is a good problem for us to solve. The results from the public survey we're still waiting for them, and we hope to have a good future together. Thank you very much. Congratulations to Abis. Thank you, Jose Marcio. Thank you, Bruno. And congratulations to all the speakers. I wish you all a great day. Thank you, Sergio. Thank you, John. Thank you, Elio. It was very important to have you with us. Now, very quickly, I'll hand the floor to Bruno because we are a little bit behind schedule. Bruno? Good morning, everyone. I'm back, and I'll be moderating the final panel. The discussions so far have been excellent. Once again, I would like to thank all the speakers, everyone who has participated with us today. Thank you very much. And now we will have our final panel, this webinar, and we will talk about different perspectives. I think it's good to conclude a seminar like this with a discussion about the future in terms of the regulation of medical devices. And if you allow me, I will expand this conversation outside the regulatory scope and talk more about overall perspectives for the Brazilian medical device sector. So, to talk to us about this, we have three important guests with us. We have Mr. Leandro Pereira. He's General Manager for Product Technologies at Anvisa. Leandro, thank you for being with us, and thank you for all the support that Anvisa and your general office has promoted. Besides Leandro, we will also have the manager for public policies in Boston Scientific. He's a great friend and a good partner. He used to work in the public sector. Now he's working in the private sector. He's really knowledgeable in the area. And we will also have Eduardo Simões, who is the president of Implemed, a board member at Abride. We are together in the battles we need to face at Abride, and he works in a very important position, not only in the medical device, working in a company that not only import these products, but also sell them throughout the country. So once again, I would like to thank the three of you. We are a little bit behind schedule, but I think we'll be able to have a good discussion. I think Leandro has a presentation for you, so if you could please start your presentation, presenting a little bit about the perspectives, not only of what Anvisa has, but also looking a little bit of to the future. Then we go to Murilo, Eduardo, and have a final discussion in the end. So welcome to the three speakers, and let's start this. Leandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you for inviting me. Congratulations to Anvisa. Congratulations on your 10th anniversary. A lot has been done, and we have a good environment to keep on doing the good work. It's a privilege to share this panel with Eduardo and Murilo, and let's talk about the future. It's always good to remember and think about the future, especially discussing it with so important and special people. So moving on from medical devices, it's a good thing whenever I see you. I normally see you before big important matches of my soccer team, which is Flamengo, and I think we will have a new title in the coming weeks. I beg to differ, I'm sorry. Well, the relationship with Anvisa is the greatest one. Let's not mix, apples and bananas. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about different and other important things. So we're going to talk about regulation of medical devices. Can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we have currently. Today, we have 80,000 medical devices approved by Anvisa. Of that total, about 30% are national products, and about 2/3 are imported products. The main countries that bring products to Brazil are the United States, China, and the countries in Europe. When we look at the scenario, we're able to understand that we have to bring to our country the possibility to improve the work that is conducted by sister agencies so that we have more efficacy to what we do. So we're always observing and looking at this scenario. So we have been working together with the aim of regulatory convergence. Anvisa is a founding member of IMDRF, and Anvisa has the responsibility to implement the approved document. We follow all the members of IMDRF regarding the implementation of the documents, and Brazil has been at the forefront of implementing IMDRF documents. Maybe the most important one is the MDSAP program. It's a very successful program. In my point of view, it's the greatest experience regarding reliance of products under healthcare regulation, and it's becoming more prominent regarding Anvisa certifications. We also have important participation of the ISO and IEC. We know the importance of the regulators since the beginning of the regulatory process, and we are also present within that debate. We also have a leadership role, and we are working on an important agenda in Mercosur to bring to the region the implementation of the IMDRF documents. We have been discussing and debating about a lot of IMDRF documents, and we count on the support of all the countries present, with a highlight to Argentina, which is also a member of IMDRF and has contributed a lot to the implementation policy of IMDRF documents in the region. We are also great partners of OMS or WHO regarding the information that is provided by WHO regarding our process, and also collaborating with the approval and certification of products for healthcare. We also have bilateral agreements that are or have been very relevant to exchange information between regulatory authorities and have contributed a lot to improve the regulatory environment in Brazil. As a consequence, we will have safer and more effective products for our population. In terms of regulatory convergence, we expect and have great expectations for the future. This future is related to reliance. Anvisa published the public survey 1039, which deals about general requirements for the recognition and assessment conducted by foreign agencies. This is an initiative coordinated by the International Office of Anvisa. And this initiative is an umbrella standard, and we will have to work with different standards for each category of product. We intend to move forward with that at the beginning of next year. So this is something that we're paying a lot of attention and is very strategic for us. We also have a second program. This program uses the MDSAP as an example, and this is the Medical Device Single Review Program. So this aims at a consortium of manufacturers to create a single review accepted by different jurisdictions. We have been working a lot on this program. It's possible that the same group of countries working on MDSAP will work on MDSRP, and it's a program inspired by MDSAP. We are very optimistic about this program, and I believe in the next couple of years we will have concrete results with a group working on that program. So we're putting a lot of effort on that program because we believe that the future of the pre-market regulation of medical devices will be strongly linked with the single review program. This is very important for companies that want to sell their products globally, and also for Brazilian companies that have the option to export. So imagine having a single review and have a large product to distribute your products. So that will only add value to everyone. So we concentrate a lot of effort on that initiative. Okay, so now talking about our regulatory agenda, we have some pillars that we work on. So the first one is to implement international documents, the reduction of regulatory requirements for lower risk products. This is a pillar that we're working on. We have been working on that for a long time, since 2015. This is our policy. And so the time for analysis is being reduced, and this is a policy that has been working. At the same time, we have seen the increase of the notification of adverse effects, so the policy seems to be very well balanced. Our regulatory policy is based on that. We have a regulatory agenda which is public. So the predictability of the sector is published, and we have been working with a lot of dialogue and support from several actors. Not always are we able to please everyone, but when we listen to the industry and the representatives of hospitals and all players, is essential to make well-balanced decisions that serve to the interests of everyone. So this is an overview of our regulatory agenda. There are 21 items related to medical devices, and 15 of them are led by the Technology for Healthcare Products Office. Of course, there are other sectors which are relevant, but I believe, in my point of view, that we have a very well-oiled agenda, and despite the pandemic, we've had not such an impact on our standard process, and we have a lot going on in the next few months, and we'll probably issue several other standards. If you look at the slide, we have several standards regarding medical devices, and we will have a lot going on in the next 2 or 3 months. So this is very important regarding, diseases that do not have treatment available by medical devices available. We expect then this standard to be consolidated, and we hope we will have this standard approved very soon, and hopefully we will have more possibilities regarding patients with rare diseases, patients that have very specific conditions that are not met by current medical devices. We also have a standard that are working on for a general proposal that has been in the works. So very soon we will have associations being called and players in the area being called to talk about this standard before the public service. So this is a very important issue, and we will talk about that in the future. We have the review of RDC 36, a standard that talks about in vitro diagnostics. We are at the end of the public survey period now. There are several documents that have been discussed, including in Mercosur. This was very well debated within the sector, and we will soon finalize the text. It will be conducted by Director Cristiani, and in the coming year, we will have a standard issued that will improve the regulatory environment for in vitro diagnostic products. We also are conducting the review of RDC 10. This is a theme that has not been fully developed yet. We will work more strongly on that after the approval of the extended theme. So the same area is conducting the two themes, and we will review RDC 10 2015 with the goal to customize a little bit more the standards about clinical research for medical devices. This is very important when we talk about clinical research for medical devices, and we want to reflect that in the review of RDC 10.
Well, two guides were recently published, so make sure you use those guides when executing your processes. The first one is a guide on the documentations required for bids for electronic medical devices. So it's the best way to present all the necessary documentation to Anvisa. It's a guide that is available on the Anvisa website, and it's really aligned with all the necessary documentation. Basically, we adapt all the nomenclature for the medical device sector, and this has been a very successful initiative. We also have a guide on cybersecurity principles and practices, which basically talks about the full implementation of the IMDF document on this topic. And we'd like to thank the contributions from the sector in the establishment of this document. RDC 185 from 2001 is also a topic that is being discussed, especially the rules that have been discussed in the Mercosur environment. So now we are bringing this discussion to Brazil. Basically, it's an adaptation to the new rules that were published in Europe. So rules from the European community for the classification of products, and we're bringing that to Brazil. The rules behind RDC 185 was already based on the European framework, and we are bringing these updates now to the Brazilian reality. The regulation of a previous analysis of medical devices for IVDs. We know that we have some medical devices that are used in bank bloods and for the diagnosis of some diseases like dengue and chikungunya. And we need to have a more formal regulation for the process of previous analysis for IVD products. And we are reviewing the essential requirements, the essential safety requirements for medical devices. What we want here is to implement the IMDRF document that talks about safety and efficacy. It is a topic that is being led by us, Anvisa, in the Mercosur environment. So we want the IMDRF document to be implemented not only in Brazil, but in the whole of the region. So this is the hot topic now in Mercosur. And our expectation is that in the next 2 years maximum, this implementation will be reality in the whole region, not only in Brazil. We also have, as part of our regulatory agenda, the UDI topic, which was really well presented by Elio and John in the previous panel. We have a consolidation meeting that is about to take place, and our expectation is to send the final version of the text for our directors in the next meeting. So it's a topic that is really well developed, and we are ready to take the next step, which is actually having the approved standard. We have the regulation of softwares as medical devices. So basically, it's the implementation of IMRDF documents with the purpose of regulating softwares with all the specificities that are connected to a product that exists in the network. It's a product that doesn't have a package. So there are very specific issues related to these products. So basically, we're working to regulate softwares. The standards were sent to a public survey, and we got very positive feedback from the sector. The standard is ready, has been written. And it's another standard that I believe in the coming meetings from the directors, maybe by January, the standard will have been approved and ready to be applied. So our work on that specific standard has already been concluded. And of course, there is a legal assessment that still needs to be conducted. And we hope that that step takes place as soon as possible so we get the approval. Another topic, which is very relevant for us, it's very important because it talks about the requirements for the import, selling, and donation of used or revamped medical devices. And this is a topic that was discussed with a lot of attention by the whole of the industry and for a very long time. And we included different stakeholders in this process. We included hospitals, the academia, the manufacturer sector. And I think now we have a pretty balanced version of the standard. We were able to make a lot of important advancements. This is the topic of the next meeting of the directors. Just to give you an idea, this is a very complex subject, but we were able to get to a regulation that only one suggestion that was made among all the others were not in favor of the text as we had written it. Of course, eventual adjustments were requested. Part of these adjustments were made, and part of the request, for example, the manufacturing sector of medical devices is against or wants the opposite of what the medical providers sector wants, but we try to find a balance between these issues with a focus on patients and society. I think this is the goal that we have. And I think that we have been able to come up with a very good final version of this document. We are very happy to deliver this result. And we hope that the decision that is supposed to be made tomorrow, we hope that it is approved. And in the end, we hope to see an improvement in this scenario and in the procedures that are used for these used medical devices. Another topic is the regulation of orthopedic implants, another important topic that we have been working on for a very long time together with the different associations. This is a topic that is under the responsibility of Dr. Mirusi, one of our directors. Recently, we had a meeting with this director together with the different associations, and our expectation now is that this will become part of the first meeting of directors in December. This new standard will improve the regulation process of orthopedic implants, and it will meet a demand, a demand that the sector has had for a long time. regarding the regulation of orthopedic implants. Another topic we have, which is the reprocessing of medical devices, a very complex topic. In my opinion, it is the most difficult topic in our regulatory agenda. It's not an accident that the president of Anvisa has required to review the document. We expect this process to take place very soon. We have had important conversations on this topic, and we hope to get his feedback this year still. And our proposal is that for the request of GTPS is to send this review text to a public survey once again. There have been significant changes in the initial proposal. The main goal that we have with this proposal is to have more respect, so to speak, to the conditions determined, the manufacturing conditions determined by manufacturers. So in the label, you have the information of the way that the product was previously developed by manufacturers. But of course, in some situations, health services providers can reprocess these medical devices, but they would be fully responsible for that. It is a difficult and complex topic, and we imagine that this discussion will be resumed still this year. That's our expectation about this. We will review the requirements for grouping materials that are used in the health sector. We are still in the early stages of this discussion, but our focus here is allowing more products for health purposes can be framed in the same registration process. Of course, there is a limited gain in scale here, because if we add too many medical devices in the same registration processes, their analysis become too slow. So we need to find an optimal number that would allow us to conduct a fast assessment with the largest number of products possible to be included in this process. This is another topic that will require the help from the whole medical device sector so we can reach important results. So I think those were our main initiatives regarding our regulatory agenda. We really value the predictability of the work we do. And due to time restrictions, I wasn't able to present the main results that we have reached this year. But of course, all this information is available in our Anvisa website through the reports that we published. We published quarterly and biannually reports, so you were able to identify all the work that we have been doing. We generate many results throughout the year, especially in such a difficult year because of the pandemic. But our main goal here is to bring medical devices to society, and we were able to reach that goal, especially during the pandemic. We flexibilized a lot of processes during the pandemic, and maybe those moments can be ideas for future regulatory processes. But keeping in mind that a moment of a pandemic is unique, so these actions cannot be necessarily replicated in a regular scenario. We also know that because of these simplification actions, especially for COVID-related products, we have had more surveillance products than before. So this is a point of attention for us. At the same time that we know that we do need to keep an environment that fosters innovation, at the same time, we also need to have the necessary constraints to allow innovation to take place with a lot of responsibility. So that's my presentation for you. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation once again. and I'm available if you have any questions. Excellent, Leandro. Thank you for your presentation. I think it's important to highlight to everyone who is watching that this communication work that Anvisa has with other agencies and with all stakeholders in the sectors, both internally as well as abroad, Anvisa has been a pioneer in establishing this communication. And I would say that Anvisa is putting into practice many aspects and many actions that truly benefit the sector, not only manufacturers, but especially to the whole of the population that now can have access to different medical devices. So this is one of the things I would like to highlight. The other thing I would like to highlight is a very robust regulatory agenda for our sector. So we have topics that are extremely important, like the public survey related to the regulatory convergency, the review process of RDC 185, and the reprocessing of materials, like you said, which is a demand that we still have, especially here in Abride directly. Some members still talk about that topic. Software as a medical device. So all the items in this agenda are extremely relevant. And in my perspective, and I think this is a common perspective among my colleagues in the industry, is that Anvisa is conducting a fine work, and you in your general office leading this process deserves all the congratulations. We know this is a special moment. A lot of people are retiring from Anvisa. There are the political hurdles, but nevertheless, Anvisa is conducting a good work as it was demonstrated during the pandemic. Now going to Murilo, and Murilo, I will take advantage to the fact, now passing the floor to you. You used to play in the public sector, now you are part of the private sector. I would like for you to look back a little bit, but also focusing more on the future and present the evolution of the regulation, thinking about Anvisa and the regulation of medical devices, and how this evolution and how this process connects to the market and to the availability of these products in the market, and how the manufacturers can act inside the medical device sector. And then in the end, we will open for questions.
Just 1 second. Leandro, could you just stop sharing your presentation? Oh, I'm sorry. My computer is not working. Okay, so Murilo will start and we try to solve the screening share. All right, so thank you so much for having me, for the opportunity of being here. It's a pleasure to participate in this panel together with Leandro, Eduardo. So I'm not going to talk about soccer because my team is not doing very well, so that I can, comment a little bit about the future. If we're still in the first series, I'm very happy. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And I was, watching Leandro's presentation and recalling the events at Anvisa. We have always invited the regulated companies and entities to, show the advancements and what we have been doing. And I hope that in the future, we're able to do that again, to talk with the industry, which is very positive. And also, Bruno, piggybacking on what you said, I was very happy to see themes about the regulatory agenda like cybersecurity, reprocessing of materials, the revision of RDC 10. This is very relevant for clinical research and medical devices. So the agenda of the agency is very well aligned with the needs of the sector and the population. I would also like to mention at the beginning of my talk, I do not have a presentation, by the way, I'm just going to talk a little bit, but I would like to, take this moment to congratulate Anvisa for the whole work done to fight the pandemic. It was an example of quick response to the needs of the population of our healthcare system. And the agency also flexibilized several regulations, but conducted it very responsibly in order to promote the access to essential materials which were vital to fight the pandemic. I'm talking about, PPE, diagnostic materials, ventilators, vaccines. The behavior of Anvisa was an example and makes us all very proud. It showed a lot of independence, autonomy, and responsibility. It's very interesting also to see that we've been going through a lot of change during this period. And the program that is, much that the program that had most audience on TV, for example, was during the approval and something conducted by Anvisa. So that reflects the importance of the agency, not only in our country, but the role that all the regulatory agencies have in the world. So talking still about the pandemic, I think we have experienced a lot. A lot of things became more flexible, and that can become a legacy regarding reliance issues. MDSAP is something that is working very well, but we also have the possibility to improve processes and implement other processes to accelerate the registration process in Brazil. Bruno, you've also mentioned, and we've already talked about this issue in other occasions. There's a limitation of staff at Anvisa to tackle a volume of requests. We know that the agency does not have, enough hands to reply in a timely manner to all the requests. But I think that what's going on regarding the governance and processes of the agency is improving the situation. It's important that we can, already use what's been approved internationally so that we do not have double work. This is important for the future. I'm going to touch on a few topics that are not only related to Anvisa, but related to the government and other entities. While I was at Brasilia, I conducted a lot of audits for Inmetro, and I know about the cost of those audits. The audits by Inmetro have a lot of importance, and the maintenance of a registered product has a high annual cost because you have to maintain the process and the policies of vigilance and traceability, and that poses a cost to the companies. So the initiatives to have virtual audits, at least on the document side, is an initiative that, may be here to stay. It can stay that way. This provides more efficiency to the process as well. Other important events that I would like to mention is that Anvisa has been working in a very positive way, listening to the industry before implementing significant changes. It's not from GGTPS, but another office conducted the review of RDC 185 regarding the obtention of economic information about medical devices. This was a resolution that had a significant impact for the companies and provided very little return for the agency regarding economic information. So a whole work was conducted to listen to the industry, to conduct a regulatory impact analysis to decide if we're going to keep the 185 regulation. We talked a lot about the economic regulation at the time, back in 2015. And when we also had the investigation about that problem of economic information that was going on at the time. But if we try to apply that for, from medications to medical devices, that is very different. And I believe that the team at Anvisa conducted a very important work that evaluated the impact, the cost of implementation, and concluded that the economic monitoring through technical information and collecting prices from the market without interfering in the market would be the best solution, and that was the conclusion. So whenever you analyze the impact, the regulatory impact, that is very important, and Anvisa has been conducting a very good job on that. That should be an example for other agencies. One of the examples that we have is something we went through with Anatel this year. There was a new resolution that did not have electrotechnical equipment, devices labeled on arrival, and that had an impact abroad, and that increased the cost for us in an unnecessary way. And whenever you increase the cost of the final cost will be higher. So with a lot of dialogue, we were able to change that. Anatel realized that it made no sense because to put the seal on some devices, you have to review the whole process of manufacturing of that product. And another example is one more recent by the Aviation Association to restrict transportation of lithium batteries, that they should be transported at 30% of their load or with an on and off switch. Of course, we want air transportation to be safe, but we have not seen any evidence that that poses a risk for the medical device. Apparently, there is a background with cell phones or laptops whenever they're carried on board of an airplane, but nothing regarding medical devices. So again, we have to conduct a regulatory impact analysis. Maybe this will, be related to the National Aviation Association in Brazil. Sometimes we have to, bring a medical device by airplane in a matter of hours to a patient. So air transportation is essential, as well as, regarding transport of organs. But the risk issue has to be evaluated before conducting a change in the regulation. I'm not sure how much time I have still, but whenever my time is up, you just let me know. Okay, Murilo, so you have 2 more minutes. Okay, thanks. So to close, I would just like to mention, I've mentioned the National Aviation Association, I've mentioned Anatel, the telecommunications agency, but I wanted to mention the access to the market. I know that CONITEC is also a regulation entity, and some of the issues have to be reviewed when you consider the methodology used to evaluate a device. The methodologies used for medical devices are very different, have different designs. Some of them are easily applied, you know, from medications into the medical device review. And so I think these agencies have to change. There's plenty of literature talking about the methodology when reviewing a medical device, both regarding clinical evidence and also regarding the economic aspects. This is a very important topic. Well, that would be it. Thank you so much for the time, Bruno. And if we have time for a Q&A, I'm available for questions. Thank you so much. Excellent, Murilo. Thank you very much. You have provided us with a nice overview. You have broadened a little bit the discussion, touching on batteries and telecommunications. So that was great. Moving on to Eduardo. I think Eduardo has a presentation. So please share your screen, and thank you so much for being with us. Can we try to work on, you know, go until 12:10, and then I would like to hear your comments on everything. Thank you so much, Jose Marcio, Anvisa, everyone. Thank you for having me. Hello, Leandro Murillo. I'm a Flamengo fan since I was little, and I'm just expecting the title right now. Okay, so can you see my screen? Not yet. We don't see anything.
É nesse botão verdinho abaixo, share screen.
If you click on the green button, share screen, you're able to do that.
Eduardo, se você preferir me mandar por e-mail,
Eduardo, if you would like to, you can send the presentation by email to me, and I will share your presentation here. Okay, so while Eduardo is doing that, I have a question for you, Leandro. So I have a question for you, and we can try to answer that. Is there a predictability of revision of the IN 185/13?
All the regulatory standards that we use are the ones that I shared with you. So we lack a lot of staff. So we have a shortage of staff. We know that we need many more standards, and we do wish to work on that, but we need to prioritize the work we do in order to advance. So we are working on those topics that I described to you. We are limited to that list. Of course, we understand that we could progress in several other areas, but unfortunately, our shortage of staff doesn't allow us to do that. The Anvisa regulatory agenda can also include other topics that can be suggested by the sector. And of course, we will be available to get your feedback on that. Thank you, Leandro. So now very quickly, Eduardo, were you able to send your presentation? Yes, I've sent it to Jose Marcio. So let's wait a couple of minutes. Jose, would you let us know when you're ready? As soon as I get it, I will share it.
Isso mesmo.
Tá. Nesse período, pessoal, quem quiser fazer algum tipo
So
de
in the meantime, if you have a question for any of our speakers, you can send them via chat or through our Q&A functionality. A lot of people asking about the slides, if they will be available, and they will. They will be available on our website. I have a comment while we wait for Eduardo's presentation to be shared. Going back to what Leandro said in the beginning of his presentation about the market characteristics here in Brazil when it comes to medical devices, we have 80,000 medical devices registered in Anvisa, and 2/3 of them are imported. So I would like to reinforce to everyone that in August, Abyss published a book that talks about the challenges and perspectives for the medical device sector. So we can deliver this publication to all the decision makers in the public sector and also to all the stakeholders in the private sector. And we have been discussing this internally, how different countries in the world after the pandemic or with the pandemic have placed the medical device sector as part of their strategic agenda. So President Biden in the United States has requested for a review in the supply chain related to the health industry because they suffered from supply chain issues. Leandro is just showing a copy of his book. And thank you for your support in the construction of this publication. But we always say this, oh, this is an election year, so the sector is always requesting new things. So our idea was to bring a proposal so we can contribute to this discussion in a qualified way. Now, like I said, this is a movement that took place in the United States. China has already a project for that. They call that vaccine diplomacy. This discussion on supply chains for health-related products is taking place everywhere in the world. So the view that Abyss has is that Brazil has a huge market for these products. We have a regulatory agency that it's one of the best in the world. I'm not just saying this because Leandro is here, but because we have, Anvisa has participated in all international discussion forums. So it does have a prominent position with a robust set of regulations. Our national industry, it has good representation, good market share, even with exports to other countries. And we also have the international industry, as mentioned by Leandro. 2/3 of all our products are imported, and they invest in Brazil as well. So what we often say in these conversations that we have, even with Dr. Baratoris and with the president of ANS and the Minister of Health yesterday, is exactly that. Brazil needs to place this sector as a strategic one. So Brazil as a country has the possibility to supply this sector. Regardless of the source of these financial resources, we want Brazil to see a growth in the sector so the Brazilian population can have access to good quality medical devices in all public systems, even though we have a unique, as a single health system that also includes the private system. This is a discussion that we have been encouraging and something that will continue to happen next year. Eduardo is I'll hand the floor to Eduardo now. He's the president of Implamed, and maybe if you could give us a perspective from the market. Implamed does an important work in importing and distributing these products here in Brazil. So I'd like for you to share a little bit of your perspective for this year and next year. Thank you, Bruno. So talking about these perspectives for the coming years, it's impossible not to talk about the pandemic, of course, but the recent improvements that also took place as a Brazilian citizen, as a businessman, I have to say that I'm really proud of Anvisa. It has had an essential role in accelerating processes and providing safety for the population. Today we have more than 75% of the population already vaccinated, and this is the result of the work done by Anvisa. We have a partnership between CBPF and MDSAP that have brought several benefits. Even though there has been an increase in the deadline for assessment of the registration, there has been a significant reduction in the time to respond, even during the pandemic. And for the technology portion, Anvisa very quickly was able to adapt, maybe next slide, was able to adapt to this new scenario. Digital processes have made these procedures much simpler. We still have some concerns, and I'm speaking as a distributor and as an importer, with a high cost in the different rates we have to pay, and the requirement of costly tests, at least for some medical devices. Sometimes we need to do a calculation. Is it worth bringing these products or not? Because of these, it's a long process and all costs need to be taken into account. We know that the only thing that will surely happen is change. And we have some known threats like fluctuations in the exchange rate, regulatory changes, and the economic instability. Another recent threat, these significant events like the pandemic or the economic crisis, and a threat of armed conflicts, problems or issues in the supply chain which affected us due to lack of raw materials, of course caused by the previous mentioned problems, and the long waiting lines for the shipment process, which not only increases the delivery time, but also increases costs. This is a report with the impacts from the pandemic published by Abride that caused a significant impact on the market of medical devices in Brazil, with a contraction of 26% in the sector, a drop in 22% on the national production, and a drop of 29.5% in imports. So like I said, there have been a drop of 22%. And the economic impacts of the pandemic, this is data from the Santander Bank. One of the main indicators is the increase in the unemployment rate, the increase of low-cost paying sources, the fluctuation of the exchange rate, the increase in the interest rates, which is exactly the opposite what businessmen mean. When we need more money, banks run away from us. The impacts of the pandemic, from the distributor's point of view, we have seen a drop of around 50.8 in revenue and a drop of 59.8 in the whole surgical volume. That also created an impact in hospitals with a reduction in revenue of around 39.9%, with a close of 24.7%, and a delinquency rate of more than 40%. So that generated the main measurements taken by distributors. Reduction of working hours was one of them, that happened up to 59%. We renegotiated our debt. We charged receivables, especially when it comes to hospitals. We renegotiated or canceled contracts with suppliers. We terminated contracts with employees. We're talking about firing people. We established a leaner infrastructure and others. Now, after the pandemic, we have to strengthen the foundations, because the impact of crisis was the increase of delinquencies, the reduction of demand, banks are not making credit so available anymore, and an impact on liquidity and an accelerated cash burn. So that made us reassess our financial planning and our cash flow to reinforce our liquidity position through the new negotiations with banks. It's important to try to read the market and how this movement would take place. I think in April or May, we have a live with the investors. At that time, no one knew, no one in the world knew what would happen. And we tried to help each other out, saying what we could do. And I said at the time that I was going to get ready for a long process, not for something short. And that was 2 years ago. We needed to, of course, get more investors. We're trying to extend the average deadline for debts. We are diversifying funding sources. We're selling non-strategic assets and other actions. So basically that we saw an acceleration in the digital transformation of the value chain with a potential reduction in players in the value chain and the financial consequences coming from that, a potential reduction in those that benefit from the private health system, and an acceleration of new business models, and a need to optimize our installed park. Some permanent changes that were adopted by our distributors, opening to new clients in the private sector. They're extending their activities or portfolio, looking for other types of products, for example. They are reducing their infrastructure and their staff in the moment when no one knew what to do. Many companies held back, but we were very fast in that sense, creating new possibilities with clients in the public sector. Working from home, I remember that our HR placed all our staff members that could work from home immediately moved to that model. And the reduction of the product portfolio was something that was done by many. So for that, thinking about the present and the future, we focus a lot to strengthen the value chain because we understand the ecosystem, which is the set comprised by the interaction between the different components. They form the elements of the environment. So in the health ecosystem is in constant search for balance. We understand that a balance is necessary when you think about patients, payers, and hospitals, surgeons, and the regulatory agencies. So this biome, which is the regional set of conditions, will result in the necessary biodiversity that we need for the ecosystem to thrive. So each component of our ecosystem is subject to changes in the different interactions that happen among them. We share all the different conditions and the shared history of political, social, and economic changes in the country. So the pandemic brought us a moment of unbalance. It is here. What are we going to do with that? The ecosystem becomes in need of adjustments. And these adjustments are now essential. So the search for sustainability of the health system is our great challenge. And if you think about the number and the diversity of the different stakeholders, I didn't know about the number of products that Anvisa has brought to Brazil, but it's an incredible amount of products that increases the complexity.
So just talking a little bit about 2019, 2020, we have distortions responsible for 64% of operational costs of suppliers. So the adaptation that the whole chain had to do because of the pandemic. So how do we balance this ecosystem? I believe in the creation of the value chain. The industry contributes a lot to compliance with all its rules and everything. We talked a little bit about that at Abride, right, Bruno? How compliance can help the whole chain to adapt to compliance. I think that's fundamental so that the ecosystem works very well. Technology is very important as well. Industry has a very important role bringing in technology. I have some concern about technologies introduced in the market that do not provide a lot of change and result in a high cost and impact the whole ecosystem. So I believe in technology when it comes to improve, increase quality and reduce costs, whether it's, with insurance or for patients. Continuing education is very important. I believe a lot in that. I believe that that will help us to extract the potential of products through continuing education. Regarding services, we all know the amount of services provided by our sector in our ecosystem, and it's important to keep on doing that. Regarding paying sources in hospitals, we have to have them paying attention to the financial cycle, the logistics cycle as well. Some hospitals have our material and it takes 5-6 days to approve devices for a surgery. So that's a huge concern that we have, and it's something that we have to talk about. And infrastructure of hospitals is also important. The suppliers have to deliver products directly to the hospitals, in my point of view, and not through a distributor. So for the next coming years, to close my presentation, I believe that companies with a high level of discipline will survive. We have to go back to the basic, do what we have to do, especially in the pandemic. Now with the recovery, economic recovery, if companies do not do their homework, I talked about that in our live session. We have to take advantage of this period to restructure the company to get to this moment of recovery of surgeries. I also believe in national startups. It's important to see innovation, new products and services so that we can start a new era. The verticalization of paying sources in hospitals is already ongoing. We also believe in the increase of participation of domestic manufacturers. And of course, the acquisition and opening of new multinational plants to reduce the costs of imports. As a last topic, I believe in products and services will come up, those that aim to simplify processes, and besides not increasing the cost of treatment, they are able to capitalize on the inefficiency of current treatment protocols. So I just try to, summarize our 35 years of implement. We have 180 employees and over 150 distributors in Brazil. So on behalf of all our employees and our staff, I would like to thank you all for having me, and I'm available for questions. Thank you very much. Excellent, Eduardo. Thank you very much for your presentation. We are already out of time, so I have to, close our presentation. I would like to summarize everything that was mentioned here. So we will have Leandro, Murilo, and Eduardo expressing their final thoughts. And one of the things that you mentioned is that everything changes. Our industry is very curious because throughout this period, we've had a change at Anvisa, and thankfully it changed for the better. It improved its services. The technology, when we talk about the industry, has also evolved a lot and keeps on evolving, especially regarding medical devices, and that poses a lot of challenges for Anvisa, whether it's post-market, pre-market, regulatory impact analysis, and so on. So all of that is part of the regulation of medical devices, always based on public policies, based on evidence, with a focus on the patients and supplying the system in an adequately way, looking at costs. And besides the regulatory framework and the changes, you also have the changes in the market, which is constantly changing, both in its economic, operational aspects. We are now discussing if the distributor, the importer, is a product or service supplier. We've been discussing that, and as you rightfully mentioned, some things in other countries are responsibility of the hospitals, but in Brazil is in the hands of the distributor. So how do we deal with those changes? How do these changes impact healthcare? In the public sector, we've seen a restriction regarding the ceiling, debt ceiling issue, because the population is aging, and on the other hand, we have the verticalization and the consolidation of the sector, hospitals acquiring hospitals, insurers buying insurers. So we have a lot of startups in the market, and all of that poses a lot of challenges regarding regulation, and that impacts Anvisa regarding products, and not only medical devices, but also medications, drugs, and so on. And the INS regulation when we talk about supplemental healthcare. So the summary of this panel is that it is really difficult to predict the future. We try to look back and have a retrospective view of what has changed for the better. I know that we still have a lot of challenges. One of the things that you mentioned, Eduardo, and I think Murilo touched on that, is the challenge for the industry. What is the industry in Brazil? What is the challenge for the industry in Brazil to, export and keep on supplying the national market? How do we attract the challenge to bring in new technology? We've seen a lot of companies from other industries leaving Brazil. So it's a lot of challenges for the medical devices. Suppliers have gained a lot of advance. They have made, improvements in quality, in the service providing, in technology. The future has always been technology. Since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen a lot of technology that we use, including the platform Zoom, where we're having this event. So the sector has really made a difference. It's been very relevant. Anvisa has also contributed a lot. We keep on having a lot of challenges, and of course, we need good technologies, medical devices, an intelligent regulation, a macroeconomic environment that favors the development in the sector, so that we're able to provide the best service and the best product for the patients at the lowest cost possible and as fast as possible. So with that, I would like to thank you all for this final panel. I would like to thank José Márcio, Bis, the interpreters, all the other speakers, and all our participants that have been with us in these 2 days. I wish you a great end of the year, happy holidays, and a happy new year. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, gente. Parabéns.